things were starting to unravel. They told me a story one time about how they would be in church, and they would write little notes back and forth to each other about what porn movie they were going to watch that night together. You see how deceptive and how crazy that sexual sin can get, and how porn can get. Eventually, it led to a divorce for them. Pornography is an enemy of intimacy. Sexual immorality is an enemy of intimacy. It destroys it. So eventually, as my wife and I in a young marriage would begin to grow into this marriage, she would begin to sense that something's wrong. Ladies, women's intuition is the real thing, baby. It is. Trust it, go with it. I think it's like the Holy Spirit or something, all right? It is. Because when you think something is wrong, it usually is. And my wife, though young, has that women's thing going on. And she couldn't put her finger on it, but she knew that her husband was there, but he's not really there. He's there, but he's not really there. There's something. There's a barrier between us called porn. There's a barrier between us that's going on here. I don't know what it is, can't put my finger on it, but I know he's there, but he's not really there. Because porn eventually it hollows you out. It makes you empty. It makes you unable to relate to the people around you. You just sort of become this shell. You become rather empty, hard to relate to and engage with. It kind of steals you away. And that's what began to happen. Now, the hardest part of this whole story that I'm sharing is this part. Because the day that I dreaded would eventually come. The day in which the secret would get out. And to the person I never wanted to hurt ever in my life. And that was my wife. I'll never forget the day. We had high-speed internet that finally come along. Amen for that. But that only helped to increase the problem for me. So I was unable to keep track of everything. And so it was one of those times where I didn't clear the history and I didn't clear the cache. I didn't cover my tracks very well. My wife hopped on the computer after me. And she clicked on that little drop-down menu. She saw all these little websites that I've been to. And she was blown away. Her heart was crushed. And she was sickened by what she saw. And it took her a couple of days to work up the courage and to kind of deal with the shock of it all before she confronted me. So she said these words to me, words that strike fear into every married man on the planet. She said, "Honey, we need to talk." And she said it in such a way that we need to talk. And so as we were climbing into bed, she said, "I saw stuff on the computer. Is that you? Is that what you've been doing?" Now, addicts lie. You gotta understand, people who are addicts, we lie. We will lie to anybody not to get caught. If the addiction is strong enough and deep enough, you will lie. And in that moment, I wanted to lie. When my kids were too young, I couldn't blame it on them. So there I was, and in that moment, I was sorry. And I was sorry that I hurt my wife. And it was rough. Tears streamed down her face. I began to weep, and it was awful, dark, just ugly. And porn had began what it does, and that's the destruction of intimacy and of relationships and what matters most. And there it was, beginning to head in that direction for me. Now, the saddest part is I was sorry I got caught, but I wasn't sorry enough to make a change. So over the next 18 months, she would continue to find more and more stuff. And I just sort of rip back open that wound every time. And ladies, you got to understand that God created you with an enormous capacity for intimacy, emotional intimacy. You want to connect. You want to be with that guy. You want to know him, and you want him to know you. You are far more vulnerable than most of us guys. And so when a guy breaks your heart, it goes deep. When you give yourself to a guy, it sticks, man. I always tell people sex is kind of like duct tape. Sex is a lot like duct tape. It's sticky and it fixes things. Alright? It sticks emotionally. When you have sex with someone, there's not just a bodily interaction there. There's kind of this soul connection, especially for young ladies. It sticks. It's memorable. That's why the breakup is so hard. That's why some people, because they have sex one time, end up getting married. Because they can't let go, because they gave themselves over. And then they live the next 20 years with enormous regrets, if they last that long. For guys, it fixes things. It makes me feel strong and powerful, and I'm the conqueror. And if I feel inadequate or insecure as a dude, if I get to have sex with that girl, I'm doing pretty good. It fixes my ego. Fixes things. Like duct tape. It's like duct tape. But God wired you ladies, and it makes a difference. So I broke my wife's heart, and I continue to break her heart. Eventually, though, for a woman, she goes into a mode where she said, I must protect me, and I must protect my family. So my wife, who is the wife of a pastor, by the way, still in full-time ministry, still hiding his porn problem, deeply fractured internally, there's no integrity. So this woman decides, I don't think I can be with this guy anymore. At least I need to go away, and maybe it'll shock him out of this crazy fog that he's in with this porn thing. So my wife decides to leave him. Now this is going to present a problem for me when I show up at church. Pastor, how's your family? Things were getting real. The fire was getting turned up. Now, my wife would always go to Arizona camp meetings. She would take the kids, they'd go out because her family's out there. Every year this happened. Every year for me, when she would leave, I would struggle. Because as addicts, when we're alone, if we're not getting sober, on the track to get sober, we will act out. That's just the way it is. You act out. So I would be good for about, 12 hours. And then I would go and it would be off. And that's pretty much what happened. My wife was leaving. She didn't tell me she had plans not to come back. She just went on her normal trip out to camp meeting. I was left alone. I went through the whole, thing of acting out. And then I came to this place. Kind of bottom. And when I would talk to my wife, she could hear it in my voice. She knew what was going on with me as we talked. She knew I was struggling. She knew I was pretty low. She knew what I was doing. She didn't have to see anything, she just knew. And I was. I was spiraling down and out of control. And I came to the end of one of those binges on one of those days that I was alone at the house. And I was done. And I was a mess. And like David says there in that song, I cried out to God. This was it, man. This has been the struggle from 9 years old at inception, Here I am, I'm a 33-year-old man and a pastor. And I've lived a double life for the last, I don't know how many years. People on the outside think I'm doing pretty good, but I know that I'm a mess. And I've lived a lie all these years. The thing that frightened me the most is that what people would think of me. I never wanted the secret to get out. I would never want anybody to know about it. I would never want to talk about this. I'm like, Jesus, just take it away. I'm going to go to sleep with the Bible on my forehead tonight, and Lord, when I wake up, it'll be gone. That's how some of y'all study for tests, too. Didn't work, did it? No, it doesn't work. I just begged God, and I pleaded with God. All along, God was sort of whispering to me, if you will confess, if you just speak and begin to sort of talk about this dark place in your life, you might very well find freedom, or you will find freedom. And there in those moments, as God began to sort of whisper those words again, there's the pain of the addiction versus the pain of allowing it to be known. I decided, I can't handle the pain of this addiction anymore. I will deal with the pain of being exposed, and people's rejection, and people's criticism, and the loss of it. I'll deal with all of that, God. Just help me to be free. And so I called the pastor I called the pastor because I believe he would be the only one, my pastor, my mentor. I knew at least maybe he would be willing to listen to me and he wouldn't destroy me, you know. And sure enough, I called him up and it was ringing, and there's a part of me that was saying, please, please, please don't answer the phone. Because you can't leave a message like that, right? Yo, I'm hooked on porn. No, you can't do that, right? Can't do that. So he answered. And I said, can you come over? We need to talk. So he came to my house, and there in the living room of my house, right here in Texas, up in Arlington, I began to speak about my struggle. And how this was the sin, this was the thing that hounded my soul all these years. And I just spoke those words. And I just said it. I never said that. I never would have admitted that ever. And there are those moments, man, I tell you, God showed up in a profound and a powerful way. And the weight and the anxiety and the paranoia that I felt for all those years because I was afraid somebody would find out, there was enormous peace that began to move in. And I could sense the weight, and if you will, the sort of the chains of being in bondage for so long begin to be released. All because I began to just open up my life and talk about the depth of my struggle. My pastor responded to me with grace. He said, you're not alone, number one, so get rid of that first lie that you believe, that first myth that you believe. You're not alone. There are a lot of people that struggle. But there is a God of grace, and He can set you free. And you can walk in freedom. So he prayed with me that day, and that was the beginning of a new journey now. It was an enormous experience there. Now, I have to say that I still had a couple of days by myself. Powerful thing that happened, that during those 2 days, my wife would call and we would talk, and she could hear it in my voice that something was different. The guy who had been split in two by pornography, who was hollow, was becoming whole again. Integrity was returning to this guy. And so she could hear it in my voice. The voice of a guy who was now getting free. And she decided on her own, even though I didn't know she was playing this thing out, she decided in those moments that she would come back. Don't tell me God isn't involved in these things. She came back home, and when she walked through the doors, if she were here tonight, she would tell you that she saw a different dude. And it was different. It was profoundly different. And then God, as God has the notion of doing from time to time, He begins to go in places that you would never imagine that He would go. He said, so Bernie, you talked to one person about it. Now I want you to talk to a whole bunch of people about it. I'm like, really? Really, God? Do we need to do that, God? Really? No, we don't. No, you do. Because in your church and in your community of faith, where they don't talk about sex, and where they are terrified of anybody who struggles with anything, people need to hear the story of a pastor who struggled, but also a pastor who I pulled out of a deep, dark place and gave him freedom. People need to hear that, and people need to be encouraged and inspired and hopefully find hope for themselves, because it goes on in your church, Bernie. That's what God's kind of communicating. I'm still not digging this whole let's talk about it thing, all right? But then I jump on board with God's plan because He generally has the best plan. So the first person I decide to talk to is none other than my conference president. So I decide, little Pastor Bernie, who's been dealing with the porn problem and now is finding freedom, I'm going to go talk to my conference president and tell him my story. So I do that. And when he got back up off the floor after he fainted, no kidding. But after it became apparent that I wasn't being fired, he asked me to do something. He said, you know, I think you need to tell that story to all the pastors in the conference. Really? Really? You think that's a good idea? And in my heart of hearts, I knew God is going to use the story for His glory. There's going to be some freedom out of this thing. Because wherever there is darkness and we keep things covered up, you never find freedom. You never find wholeness.